Okay, hi guys. So this video is a video tutorial to explain some techniques for our second Blender 3D modeling exercise. This time it's based on the Tower of Babylon story by Ted Chiang, and also just more broadly the Tower of Babel myth. The reason that I'm using this as an exercise is to expand upon the idea of using array modifiers to generate complex forms from, my rotation's getting a bit crazy, to generate complex forms from very simple individual objects. So in this case, I've got quite a tall tower of Babylon, but actually, I've only modeled 2 or 3 components. And I'll sort of show you how that works before starting a new file. If I click on my tower element here, and I look in my array, I can change the count number of this array to double it to 24, and I've got 24 more levels have appeared on my tower, and I can do the same for my railings. So if I click on this set of railings here and change this modifier to 24, I'll zoom out so you can see what it will do. Change this to 24. Then the railings continue to spiral all the way up to the top, and the same with the other set of railings. There's actually 2 sets of railings winding around each other, simply because that's what Ted Chiang describes in the story. But again, this is, I've done some quite lazy, quite simple 3D modeling here. You're welcome to use these techniques to make things far more beautiful, far more decorative or creative. I'm just trying to show you the very, very basic techniques to creating these complex iterated structures. Okay, so I'll start a new file and we'll make this together from scratch. Okay, so I'm in my new file setup with the default cube and the default camera. I'll press the letter N to bring up my transform menu. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to keep the cube here, and I'm going to change its dimensions. Now, a lot of the numbers I use in this tutorial are because I spend a bit of time fiddling around to get this tower to work, and you'll sort of see as I go that some of this fiddling you can do yourself and work out your own numbers. I'm just using numbers that get me close enough to what I want without wasting too much of your time working it out for the first time. So the dimensions I'm putting in here are 108 meters by 108 meters by, I'll zoom out a bit, by what was my height? My height is 32.4 meters. Now that's for the base of the tower base. The reason I put in these numbers is I'm using the measurements in Ted Chiang's story. So he talks about the height and breadth of the base in cubits, and I simply went onto Wikipedia and looked up how long a biblical cubit was, and 1 cubit was, I think, 54 centimeters. So that's where I've got my dimensions from. Okay, now that's the base of the tower. I'm going to add the first block of the tower, which Ted Chiang also gives the dimensions for. So I'll add a new cube. Maybe I'll just bring it up a bit. There it is. And its dimensions will be 32.4 on all, oops, that's 3.2, 32.4 meters on all sides. Now, what I just did there was I clicked and dragged all 3 of the dimensions boxes, so I can just type that number once, which is kind of handy. And I'll set the height of this to 27 meters, and I'll just manually grab G for grab Z for Z axis, and I'll just move the base down by itself. That doesn't need to be super precise. So the first thing I want to do is use an array modifier to set this tower to have more and more blocks go on top of it. So first of all, with this block, I'm going to apply its scale. So its scale is set back to 1. And then I'm going to add an empty, Shift A, add an empty plane axis, and I'm going to call this empty tower underscore iterator. Now, you can call it whatever you want, but tower iterator makes sense to me because it's what's going to iterate every new block of the tower. Okay, so on that base block, I'll add my array modifier, and I'll turn off relative offset, expand this so you can see it, and I'll turn on object offset, and I'll put in tower iterator. Now you can see that's iterated it down, so we need to change the position of the tower iterator. We'll change its position on the z-axis to 57.772, should be about right, and its scale to 0.9. Okay, so again, I sort of worked out some of these numbers a bit earlier. So now, if I go back into the array modifier on that bottom block, if I change this number to 12, we've got a 12-story tower there. Nice and simple. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to add the railings wrapping around the tower. And that's pretty much going to be it for the tutorial, but it'll take a little bit of time. So let's make the first railing. So Shift A, I'll add a new cube, mesh cube. I might just go into the side view here so I can see the cube, Z and wireframe, and I'll just move my cube up so I can see what I'm doing. And I'll move it up to the base. Actually, no, look, I need to move this base block down a bit. Might want to be a little bit more precise. I'm just hitting G and Z to move that down. And so I'll put this railing block down on the bottom, and it's still hiding in the middle of our cube, so I'll look from the top down. Actually, no, look, what will I do? I'll just grab it on the y-axis, go back to solid mode, G, Y, and pull it out. So there it is. This is going to be our railing. So first up, I'm just going to make its width the same as this block. So I'll make its width 32.4, and I'll leave its Y depth at 2 meters, but I'll make this thinner. So that's going to be what our ramp is going to look like. The next thing I'll do is I will go into edit mode, press 3 for face select, and look in side view, and okay, hold on. Looks like we're not actually in a neutral position here. I'm going to put it back to 0 on the z-axis, that's better. Okay, back into edit mode with that face selected. So you can see I've got this face selected here on the side of the ramp. Go into side view, and I just want to press G and Z and make sure it's touching the ground. Now, I worked out a height for this ramp by basically saying that I want 8 ramps to equal 1 height of the box. So that means that basically I took the height of the first block, which is 32.4, divided it by 8, which is about 4.4. And a very quick way to make sure that this height is 4.4 is, you can see the height there at the moment is 1.26. So if I just, if I grab it up on the z-axis a bit more and then go out of tab, you'll see that now the height is 4.465. A very quick way is, you can just add a cube, make its dimensions. I think my exact height was, I've got it written down here, 4.42. Now, I'll just grab this block. Where did my cube go? Oh no, sorry, the scale here should be, dimension should be 4.42, not the scale, that's my mistake. Okay, and I'll just bring it out here near my ramp. Okay, whoop. And if I look from the side, I'm just using this basically as a quick and easy ruler. There's a ruler tool as well, but I find this is often slightly more convenient. So I'm just going to put this cube on the ground as well. Doesn't need to be super precise because there's a little bit of fiddling involved here. And so I just want to make this ramp the same height as a cube. That's the only reason I put this cube here. So I'll go back into shaded mode to see what I'm doing, and I'll go into edit mode by pressing tab, grab this face here, and in the side view I'm just going to press G and Z to bring that face down So now the height of my ramp is 4.42. Hang on, I'll delete this cube now. Thank you for your help, cube. All right, so the next thing we want to do is start to wrap this ramp around the base of the tower. So I'll just go ahead and apply the scale of the ramp. So the scale is 1, 1, 1, 1, right? And I should also apply its location. Okay, and you'll see why. Okay, so now I'll add a modifier, another array modifier, but this time we're also going to use an object offset, but I'll have to make a new empty. So Shift A, add empty, plane axis, and I'll call this empty ramp iterator 1. Okay, so ramp iterator 1, and ramp iterator 1, its location will be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then on the height it will be 4.05, and its rotation will be 90 degrees on the z-axis. So if I just put this ramp iterator 1 here, you'll see that that's kind of starting to work. And if I raise this number up to 8, we'll see our ramp is wrapping around, but they're not actually meeting in the corners. So I'll just fix that up now. So basically, if I look at the original monomer, you'll see there's a nice trick that anything we change on the first monomer will be changed on all of the other ramps. That's the nice thing of working with arrays. So for example, if I extrude this on the x-axis, we'll have them connecting like this. That might work. Whoop, so I clicked the wrong axis there. I just want to look at this side on and see how well this is connecting. I might just grab that on the x-axis and bring it further across. I'll just go into wireframe mode because I want to grab all of these faces, and I'm going to grab on the z-axis and lift them up. As I said, my numbers here are kind of approximate to something that should work reasonably quickly on this tutorial, but we'll probably have to fix things up a little bit as we go. Yeah, and also it looks like I want to move the original a little bit closer to the tower to close that gap. So I'll grab it on the y-axis. I might just hide the monomer for a second. Grab on the y and move it closer to the tower. Okay, so that's a little bit better. We might tweak this a bit as we go along. The next thing I want to do is, if I just use this existing array and I say put this count up to 24, you see a problem, which is that the tower is getting thinner as it gets higher, but the ramps are staying the same width. So we don't want that. We want the ramps to stay close to the tower at all times. So I'll set that array back to 8, and what I'm going to do is just make a second array under the first array, and this time include a scale. Okay, so I'll add a second array, turn off relative offset, and I need to make a second empty plane axis, and I'll call this one ramp iterator 1 height. And the dimensions for this are, the height of this empty should be 33.475, and also its scale at 0.9. So I'll go back into my array, tick object offset, and put in that height. Now how's that working? I'm going to put this up to 12 just so I can see if there are any errors as we get to the top. Sometimes they're easier to see. Yeah, there are a few errors. Okay, look at that. Our ramp is moving over to the side. So something I've done wrong. Let's just look at this. Okay, I can see the mistake already. So in this empty, for the height, I thought I had them. Oh yeah, okay. Here's our problem, that the entire ramp, for some reason, its Y location has been shifted to 0.26. Now I know why that why that happens. So I'm just going to turn off that array, and I think it's because when I moved this across, I didn't apply its location. So I'm just going to hit Control A location, and now if we turn on the second modifier, we should, if we're lucky, yep, good. So all the way up the top, the ramps are all still in the correct position. Now if we want to tweak, we might want to make a few last changes to this ramp, because when we get into the second iteration and the second height of the tower, the ramps aren't quite matching up. So we'll just make some changes to the original ramp and see if we can fix that up. So what I might do is, I'm going to go back here, because remember there's actually only one ramp in the scene at the moment, it's the bottom one. I'm going to grab this on the x-axis and sort of push it back, and I might make that change from the other end. So if I grab this side and grab it on the x-axis, G and X, actually no, I'm going to extrude it, because if I grab it, we're getting some weird angles happening here that aren't so good, or are they? Hold on. Oh, it's not. No, look, I'll extrude it. Okay. EX, now it comes out flat, like sort of a landing on the staircase. And let's see how that connects once we get up here. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Still not quite perfect. How much stuffing around are we going to do here? Let's just have another look. I might just see if I can focus in here. So just let me get my camera oriented the way I want it. Okay. Okay. Now, let's have a look on the side axis. Where are we here? Okay, that's what I wanted to look at. I just wanted to look at this, grab these faces, and can we get this to connect a little bit better here? Probably. And will that change help the rest of our model? Let's have a look. It does a little. This, I'm still not entirely happy with this, but look, I might leave some of that tweaking for either class tutorials or later on. I just want to get the basic principles of this array structure communicated in this video. So to keep the video from getting too long, I'll continue. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is, in Ted Chiang's story, he mentions that there are two sets of pathways wrapping around, intertwined, I think is the word he uses, intertwined around one another. Okay, so in order to achieve that intertwinedness, I'm going to do a little trick, which is basically I'm going to take this first ramp and reverse it and have it rotate around in the opposite direction. So what I'll do is I'll just Shift D, duplicate, and left click, and that. Oh, okay, that's interesting. I didn't name my ramp in the beginning. Let's call this ramp 1 monomer, and the one I just created, let's call it ramp 2 monomer. I couldn't tell them apart in my inspector. You should always name things. Okay, so I'll get rid of the modifiers on the ramp 2 monomer, and now I'm just going to do a trick where, to flick this over, I'm going to scale it on the x-axis by -1. So I'll hit SX -1. Okay, so now we have a ramp going in the opposite direction. The other thing I'll do is I'll just grab it on the y-axis and pull it to the side of the first ramp. So now we have a sort of ramp number 1 and ramp number 2. And I'm sure we'll have to make a few changes to it as we go. The first thing I'll do is I'm going to apply its location so these numbers go back to 0. This was a problem we had on the first ramp when it started getting off to the side of the tower up the top. We wanted to have these locations all at 0, so as it wraps around, it continues to wrap around the center of the tower, which is also at 0. Okay, so Control A, I'm going to apply the location. And I'll apply the scale. So now we've all got ones and zeros. Okay, so now, much like the previous ramp, I'm going to add an array modifier. I'll turn off relative offset and turn object offset on. And I'm going to make a new empty plain axis, and I'll call this ramp 2 iterator. And the position of ramp 2 iterator will be, its location will be 4.05, and its rotation will be -90, and its scale will remain at 1. Let's just see if that does the job for us. Ramp 2 iterator kind of does the job for us, but you can see now that we are wrapping further away, further up, because we're on the outside of the first ramp, we've got to make some changes to the original ramp model. So I'll click on the model, I'll press tab to go into edit mode, and I'm going to grab on the x-axis. Oop, hold on, these faces looking, okay, I had more than one face selected, that's why. I'm going to grab on the x-axis and move this face back out, so we've got that platform again. Now I'll just put the count of the array up to 8, and hopefully that should be working pretty well. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is exactly like the first ramp, we're going to add the array that allows it to wrap all the way up to the height of the tower. So I'll close this array, add the second array, turn off relative offset and turn on object offset, and then I'm going to make a new empty, and I'll call this ramp 2 iterator underscore height. And the position of the ramp 2 iterator height is 33.475 on the z-axis, and its scale on all 3 axes is 0.9. Okay, so now I'll go back into this second ramp, and oops, that's the first one. We want, no, there we are, yep. And I want to add ramp 2 iterator height as the modifier. And looks like we'll have some issues again. What have we got going on here? We're still not connecting. I'm going to add this to 12 just so I can see what problems we've got. Looks like we're in the right position. We're just not linking up here. You know, every rotation we've got this gap. So let's go back down to the bottom. I'll put this back down at 2 so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so how can we fix this? Maybe much like the first one, maybe we sort of extend it out on the wrong axes at the beginning. So it looks like if we grab the short side of the ramp, the bottom of the ramp, grab that face. So I'm in face select mode. That's so you know 1, 2, 3 for vertex, edge, or face selection. I'm in face select mode, and I've grabbed that bottom edge, and I'm going to actually look up here while I move it. I'm going to hit grab and X and just join our ramps up that way, and I'll shorten that other edge. Okay, so if I shorten it here, it should fix it up everywhere. If I grab it on the x-axis, maybe that's a better way for our ramp to join up. And that looks like that one's joining up pretty nicely. So I'll put this number, the count, back up to 12. Okay, great. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. You can see that I haven't really done anything very beautiful or complex. I've really just shown you this operation of using array modifiers with empties and varying the scale and the position of these empties so that you can make one basic structure that repeats itself here with the variation of rotation and scale. This is a basic form of what we call procedural modeling, creating complex things from very simple principles. And I'll remember to Control S, save your file, put it where it needs to be. Okay, I'll just open the previous file that I made for you, and I'll show you, once you've got the basic principles down, I'll show you what some other things you can do. So what I did on the first tower I made is I did a few things. I added this little detour on the second ramp in order for it to pass around the first ramp, because otherwise, in the story, Ted Chiang talks about how the ramps could pass by one another, and I just wanted to make sure that they didn't, completely cut around one another, and that there was perhaps this little meeting place was possible. So all I did there was let's go back down to the bottom. I'll show you what I did. Is say if this is our first monomer here, I made some loop cuts here with the loop cut tool, and basically I grabbed some of the faces, I extruded them out, and I made this shape here. The other thing I did is I added in these railings. Adding in the railings, I added in a person too for scale, just so we can see how the tower's looking. I think my tower still feels a bit small. I'm not sure if I used the correct biblical translation of the cubit that Ted Chiang uses, because my tower feels awfully small. But to add in the railings, basically I made one block, and then again I just used an array, and I made lots and lots of blocks, and then I joined all of the blocks onto the original railing. So the purpose of this is to show that if your original railing has all of these railings, then every single one in the array will have them. So now there's thousands and thousands of these small railings, all resulting from the original monomer. And I just did that. I did the same thing to the base. But okay, I'll return to this in class and see how far you guys get with this initial tutorial, and if we need to go into more detail, I'll do that in class, or perhaps make another small video. Okay, so that's it for the second exercise in Blender, procedurally modeling Ted Chiang's Tower of Babylon. Okay, bye guys.